Welcome to Passion for Sound, the channel dedicated to thorough and honest reviews of headphones, earphones, DACs, headphone amps, other components and accessories. Basically everything audio related except power amps and passive speakers. My name's Lachlan and my goal is to explore and discuss all kinds of audio topics, even the controversial ones, to help us all find more enjoyment from music. Thanks for watching and enjoy the video. One of the great things about this hobby, and indeed being a reviewer, is the ability to try a bunch of different headphones with different sounds, different styles, different designs. But a lot of the times, the headphones that we try are all very similar. There's tweaks in the tuning of them, but generally there's not a lot different. It's a cable or a pair of cables coming out of ear cups, going to some sort of headphone amplifier, and that's the end of the game. But the HiFiMan Deva that I've got here in front of me today, they change everything about that. They've got their own sound, they've got their own style, but they've also, most importantly, got an innovation that really sets them apart from the competition. So come with me now as I explore whether or not there's a better headphone for $300 US, whether or not the Bluetooth attachment for the Deva sounds close to or as good as the wired connection, and also to see whether the Deva is a better choice than HiFiMan's own Sundara or HE400 headphones. But to start all that off, I probably should explain for anyone not familiar with the Deva what this is and what you're getting. The Deva is a $300 US planar magnetic headphone from HiFiMan, so that's around about 390 Australian dollars. But it's not just a planar magnetic regular wired headphone, because it comes with a little attachment here. Now this is what they call the Blue Mini Bluetooth adapter. It plugs directly into the headphone itself, it's battery powered, and it gives you both Bluetooth but also USB connection to either your computer or to a phone. This is unique and special, and I'll talk shortly about why it's so important to the Deva and why it makes the Deva the headphone that it is. I should mention that Deva is a Sanskrit word and it means divine, and I have to say I think it's very fitting here. I find the Devas to be a pretty divine headphone in many ways, even though they've got a distinct flaw, which I'll talk about shortly. Before I do that though, I just want to talk a bit more about the design, the features and the specs. So I've mentioned the Blue Mini Bluetooth adapter. You can also use the headphone socket that the Blue Mini plugs into to connect the wire provided in the box with the Devas directly to your headphone amp. So that means you can drive the Devas three ways. You can drive them as a normal headphone straight out of your portable music player, your phone, etc. You can drive them as a USB headphone using the Blue Mini USB socket, and or you can drive them as a pure Bluetooth headphone. The Devas are an 18 ohm, 93.5 decibel sensitivity headphone, so they're very low impedance and they're also very sensitive for a planar magnetic. And that's because there's an ultra-thin diaphragm being used, which, according to HiFiMan, makes them very light and agile with the movement of the diaphragm, which should improve the speed and responsiveness of the sound. As I'll talk about shortly, it helps in some ways and not in others, but we'll get to that soon. The other things to mention are that the Deva use the new design language of a lot of the lower-end HiFiMan products, like the HE400, in that they use this very thick headband with the rounded end pieces and the very simple shaped round cups. So I don't dislike that. I don't necessarily like the headband design. It looks a little bit basic for me, a little bit chunky for me, but it feels okay for a cheaper headphone, and it seems like it's going to last the long term. The main pieces, like your yokes here for the headphone cups, are all metal, and the various parts that touch your head are a combination of leather or some sort of fake leather with some nice padding and a little bit of cloth on the inside of the pads. So everything's fine. It's not amazing quality, but it looks and feels okay for the price you're paying. Remember, these are a $300 headphone that's also Bluetooth enabled, so if you put that in the scheme of things, it's up there with as good as anything else in the range and the price. Some people are going to like the colorway of the tan with the silver. I don't mind it. Around the house I quite like it, but when I thought about taking these out into the street, I suddenly questioned whether I actually wanted to be seen wearing these in public, walking around, say walking to the train station or the like. Of course, another consideration when I talk about walking to the train station is that these are an open headphone. So it's very unusual here that we've got an open wireless headphone. Designed, in other words, for portability and moving around hands-free or wires-free, I should say. These are going to let all of the sound out and all of the sound in. So they're probably more of an around the house, around the office headphone and less of a commuting headphone because they are going to block out none of the ambient noise and everyone's going to know what you're listening to. So let's put this aside now because really what matters is talking about the sound quality. Now my testing was a little bit complex for these because they can be driven 3 different ways. And so I started off wired to get a sense of exactly what the headphones themselves could do in isolation and driven by a top quality source. Running from the Hugo TT2 and the M scaler, what I found was that the sound from the Devas was a little bit too thin for my liking. That agility from the ultra-thin diaphragm seems to have also given them a lack of weight in the sound. There's definitely an agility and a cleanliness and a clarity to the sound, but the notes were just lacking weight and there was a little bit too much emphasis in the upper mids or lower treble for my tastes. When I compared them to the cheaper HiFiMan HE400, the 2020 version, and I've got a review of that coming soon by the way, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see that. When I compared it to the HE400, what I found was that the 400 had the better overall sound quality because of the lightness and the thinness of the sound from the Deva. But don't stop watching the video just yet. There's a lot more for me to say, so stick with me because things are going to change in just a moment. Listening to You Don't Get Me High Anymore by Phantogram, what I found was that the Devas got a bit hashy in the treble. Now hashy is obviously not a technical word, but I don't know how else to describe it. Things just got maybe a bit splashy, a bit noisy, a bit congested and crowded and hard to pull apart the different sounds. It was just like a wall of treble at the upper end, and I didn't find it particularly enjoyable from the Devas, whereas the HE400s kept everything nicely in control. There was also a better sense of focus in the soundstage from the HE400, and overall I found that whilst both headphones were a bit lean and lacking in bass for my tastes, the 400 was the better sound overall. But everything changes when you start to use the Blue Mini. I can only imagine that the Blue Mini has been tuned specifically for something like the Deva, or maybe the Deva was tuned using the Blue Mini as the source. Because when you use the Blue Mini, the sound from the Devas is the exact opposite. So everything I've just described as being not so good about the Devas compared to the HE400s, it's like the Devas leapfrogged the HE400 and now doing everything better, making the HE400 sound less focused, a little bit looser and noisier in the treble, and also having that leaner sound. So with the Blue Mini attached, you can use it either, as I said before, as Bluetooth or as kind of a USB cable DAC and amp of sorts if you like. And what I found was that if you use it first as the USB connection to get maximum sound quality, the Devas are taken to a whole different level. Suddenly now, instead of comparing the Devas to the cheaper HiFiMan HE400, which is about $130 less than the Deva, now I was thinking about them along the same lines as the Sundara, which costs a couple of $100 more. When using the Blue Mini with the Devas, the sound is so close to the Sundaras that it starts to become a question of personal preference. The Sundaras are a bit smoother, they focus just a little bit better in the soundstage, but overall things are pretty similar. And that was using the Hugo TT2 as my source for the Sundaras. So all of a sudden you've got a $10, $12, whatever $1,000 system as the DAC and amp driving the Sundaras versus the tiny little Blue Mini driving the Devas. So what that means is that you may find that the Deva with the Blue Mini can actually outperform what the Sundara can do with certain separate amps and DACs. If you take that a step further, what that means is instead of spending $200 more on the Sundara, plus whatever you're then going to spend on your amp and DAC to get that setup running, you could save all of the money you've spent on the amp and DAC, save the extra $200 from the Sundara, and just get yourself a pair of Devas with the Blue Mini, which is included, so you're not paying extra for that. And that's where I find the Devas to be an absolutely compelling offering. The sound from them is stunning, it's enjoyable, it's open, it's transparent, the soundstage is quite good, the focus is very good in terms of the imaging, they just do everything very, very well. They're not a particularly warm or rich sounding headphone, they're more of a linear presentation. I didn't go to the trouble of measuring the Devas because it's going to depend a lot on how you're driving them, whether you're using the Blue Mini or Bluetooth or a wired connection. Based on my listening, there was more than enough change to the sound from the Blue Mini that I wouldn't trust the measurements I would get using my normal testing rig to show you what the Blue Mini is doing with the Devas. Instead, what I'd say is that with the Blue Mini, they're very similar to the Sundaras. They're a bit more agile, a little bit less smooth perhaps, but therefore a little bit more open and detailed sounding at times, depending on the track. For example, in some recordings I found the Devas did a better job of the clarity and the little bit of edge and texture from an acoustic guitar, whereas on other tracks I found the smoothness of the Sundaras suited certain vocals better. So it's going to depend a lot on the track which of these you prefer, but for the price and the versatility, it's really hard to go past the Devas. I'm not suggesting they're a perfect headphone by any stretch. What I'm suggesting is they're an incredible offering for the price. Now, the final thing that's really important to mention is the performance gap between cabled and wired connection. Remember, Bluetooth, even the best possible codecs, is not lossless. So you're going to lose a little bit of resolution and a little bit of clarity, potentially soundstage size, when you're going Bluetooth. And that's true as well for the Devas with the Blue Mini. If you want maximum sound quality, you'll be connecting the cable to the Blue Mini from either your phone or your computer. If wireless sound is more important to you though, you're just going to use Bluetooth, knowing that you're losing a little tiny bit of resolution and detail, but the best news of all is tonality stays identical. So whether you're using the cable or the Bluetooth, the tonality details that I've already mentioned, so the richness in sound, the smoothness, the better note weight, etc., is all going to be the same for the wired USB or the Bluetooth connection. The only time the Devas struggle to me is if you pair them up with a direct wired connection to a particularly neutral and lean system, they do sound a bit thin and lifeless. Of course, if you've got a thicker, warmer sounding type device, like maybe an Asgard 3 from Shit, you may find you can still get great sound out of the Devas, but I do believe they're going to be best when paired with those warmer, thicker, richer sounding devices. I've recently reviewed the Q1 DAP from Shandling. That's another one I think would be great because it has got that slightly richer, warmer sound. Dragonfly Cobalts would do a great job as well, so there are devices out there I think would work well, but for me, I just think I'd stick with the Blue Mini because it's like a match made in heaven. If everything I've described sounds like a good fit for your tastes, I'll put a link down below as always where you can find out more and buy a set of Devas for yourself. But for now, happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.